All right, everybody, get ready, because in this deep dive, we are going all in on upping your management game.
We're talking big-time skills.
We are going deep on some Gallup research. It's really fascinating stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That reveals, well, the strengths and weaknesses and, the blind spots that we all have as managers.
We all have them. Nobody's perfect, right?
But, and this is a big buzz, but when it comes to management, those blind spots can cost companies a crazy amount of money. We're talking trillions.
$8.8 trillion globally. Trillion. With a T.
Yeah, that's a T.
It's not a typo.
So that's why this Gallup study is so interesting. What makes it different is that it compares what managers think they're really good at.
Yeah, in their minds.
Versus like what their employees are actually experiencing.
It's like getting that unfiltered feedback.
Yeah, and it's even more important when you think that less than half of employees actually formally review their managers.
Exactly. So this direct feedback is pure gold.
Oh, for sure.
This study breaks down 20 different management behaviors. And guess what? The things that managers and employees both agree are working well, they're pretty simple.
Like what?
We're talking about being responsive, providing what your team needs, being approachable, like Management 101.
Yeah, the bare minimum, right?
Exactly. The stuff you need just to function as a decent human, let alone a good manager.
Okay, but here's where it gets a little sticky. Even with those basic things, there are still gaps.
Oh, absolutely.
Like responding to messages. There was a 21-point difference between managers and employees.
Wow.
The managers, they thought they were crushing it.
Of course.
But something tells me some of those messages were getting lost in the void.
Right. So it's not about saying managers are terrible at checking email. It's realizing that communication is more than just sending something off. It's about making sure it actually got through, understood, all that.
Totally.
Which brings us to those areas where managers and employees both know things could be better. The known weaknesses.
Right. And this is where we start to see that connection to that scary $8.8 trillion number, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is about employee engagement, and it's directly tied to these weaknesses.
Okay, so break that down for us.
We're talking about those core skills, like being a good coach, giving feedback that actually means something, removing obstacles that are holding people back.
So not just checking boxes, but really developing your team.
Exactly. And the research really emphasized how important it is to have frequent, quality coaching conversations. It's not those once-a-year performance reviews where the feedback feels like old news. It's about building a culture of ongoing feedback and support.
It's like taking care of a plant, right? You can't water it once a year and expect it to thrive.
Exactly. You need that constant care. And that's what a lot of managers are missing, it seems. In fact, you want to know the lowest rated behavior by far.
Hit me with it.
Giving meaningful feedback in the last week. Let that sink in for a second.
Ouch. That's rough, but also it's a huge wake-up call for managers who think they have this whole feedback thing figured out. It makes you think, though, right? Like, where are managers really off? Where do they think they're killing it, but their teams are, like, not so much?
Yes. Now we're getting to the blind spots. And the biggest culprits here might surprise you.
Okay, hit me.
2 things. Recognition and how often they give feedback.
Recognition, huh? You'd think that'd be the easy one to get right. Everyone loves a good job, right?
But there's a huge disconnect. A full 60% of managers, they thought they were great at recognizing their teams.
Okay.
But only 35% of employees agreed.
Ouch.
And it gets worse. It's not just about how much you recognize people, but how. Another Gallup study found that only 12% of employees, get this, 12% had ever been asked how they like to be recognized.
Wow. Talk about missing the mark. It's like when, you think you've gotten someone the perfect gift, like you nailed it, and then later you realize they hated it.
Oh, yeah.
Total facepalm.
The worst.
But, okay, what about the feedback frequency? That one seems more straightforward, right?
You'd think so. But get this, 50% of managers said they give feedback weekly.
Okay, that tracks.
But only 20% of employees said they got it that often.
Whoa. That's a big difference.
Right. So it's not just that the feedback isn't good. It's that managers are totally missing, that it's not even landing. Like there's a communication breakdown happening.
So it's got to be a two-way street. You can't just fire off feedback and assume it's working.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about strengths, weaknesses, those blind spots. Anything else from this study we should hit on?
One more interesting thing. Unrecognized strengths. These are things where employees actually rated managers higher than the managers rated themselves.
Well, that's interesting.
Right. It turns out This was all about accountability. Employees felt their managers were better at creating accountability for high performance than the managers gave themselves credit for.
Huh. So maybe managers are just harder on themselves?
Could be. They're the ones on the hook for the team hitting their goals, so they're probably more critical of what needs to improve.
Makes sense. So, big picture, we've covered a lot here. What should our listeners be taking away from all of this?
The point isn't to make managers feel bad. It's about giving them tools to improve, right? If you think back to those things that make employees engaged at work, a lot of them tie directly back to those weaknesses and blind spots we talked about.
So if you're a manager listening to this and you're thinking, okay, I'm ready to up my game, how do you bridge that gap?
That's the big question. And the good news is, the Gallup study, they actually have some really practical tips.
Okay, like what?
Well, it starts by ditching those old school top-down performance reviews.
Ah, okay.
And replacing them with continuous feedback.
So what does that look like day to day?
So think like 360-degree reviews where everybody's giving feedback, not just managers.
Oh, interesting.
Regular check-ins that are more than just, how's that project going?
Right.
It's got to be a real conversation.
Yeah.
And creating a space where people feel safe to speak up.
So they can actually be honest.
Exactly.
And share what's really going on. Because it is a gift. Like, even when it's a little awkward.
Oh, for sure.
Feedback is how we grow.
100%. And that actually leads to the second piece of advice from the study. Developing your coaching skills.
Okay, coaching. Everybody's talking about coaching these days.
Yeah, and this isn't about some one-off training that everybody forgets as soon as they walk out of the room.
Right, like checking a box that you went to the coaching seminar.
This is about really changing how you manage. It's about making coaching part of your everyday style.
So it's less like, here's what you're doing wrong,
right,
and more like, how can I help you be even better?
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, we've covered so much today.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Here's something I want you to think about. Think about the absolute best feedback you ever got in your career.
Ooh, good one.
What made it so good?
Yeah.
How did it make you feel? Now think about how you can bring that same energy into your management style.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be at work, by the way.
Oh, that's a good point.
It could be with your friends, your partner, whoever.
Yeah, just how you show up for people.
Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about.
Ooh, that's good. Mic drop. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and breaking all of this down.
Well, thanks for having me. I always love these conversations.
And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the minds of managers. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep that feedback flowing.